Hi there. Um, Going a little bit more into New York's new extreme abortion law. And I'm going to also put a link below to a video that I watched last night where a woman went through and she actually looked at the text of the law and saw that there was not only the part that they were openly celebrating and lighting up the gigantic phallus of freedom pink. I find that really interesting. You celebrate abortion by lighting up a giant dick. Hello, some little unconscious recognition of who's really benefiting here. Um, but at any rate, um, some of the little subtler thing that they did was they struck killing a fetus from the law entirely. Okay. You see these pro sports guys who get some girl pregnant and they hit her with their car, they beat her, they, take a baseball bat to her abdomen, kill the baby. In New York, it's not explicitly legal. They didn't say, "Oh, go ahead, beat her into a miscarriage, go for it." But there's no penalty for it. The only penalty would be the assault on her. The fact that you killed her loved and wanted baby, no problem. And another aspect of that is pretty much from now on, uh, any woman who kills her baby after it's born and throws it in the dumpster or leaves it in the toilet at McDonald's can claim, "Well, I was just self-inducing an abortion. It's not my fault. I botched it." And she probably would be able to slide through. We're gonna have to see if a lawyer latches onto that or whether lawyers are that daring. But at any rate, I want to go back to 1970 when New York once again led the country in yay, abortion! Woohoo! We're the abortioniest state in the country. Um, they passed a law that went into effect in the summer of 1970 that allowed abortion on demand in outpatient facilities, which at the time was pretty shocking. Okay, in California, when they legalized abortion, you had to do it in a hospital. You needed to take some medical responsibility for what happened to your patient. It wasn't a free for all like it was in New York. So New York, up to 24 weeks, abortion on demand, outpatient, have at it. And I'll go into a little bit later some of the cost that women paid for that. But right now, I want to look at who came flocking to New York. And I'm going to give you the example of this fellow named Jesse Ketchum. Now, Jesse Ketchum was already kind of an okay guy. Yeah, Jesse's our boy as far as the abortion rights movement was concerned because he did abortions. And frankly, just like today, people were referring to karmic gods now, perfectly reputable clinics sending women to this guy. Um, the criteria for we're going to trust him with women's lives is he will take the instruments in his hand and do the abortion, and that's all we need to know about him. And that was the case with Jesse Ketchum, too. He would take the instruments in his hand and do the abortions. So, clergy consultation services, which had formed expressly for the purpose of sending women to abortionists, frankly, um, they were thinking it in terms of helping these women get help. But I look at it more as a marketing tool for the abortionists, especially if you look at some of the people they were sending these women to. One of them was Jesse Ketchum, and he was in Ypsilanti, Michigan. And, he had a legitimate, if somewhat lawsuit prone, medical practice. Um, and he also, I do not know why he did the abortions in a motel room instead of in his office. Most doctors at the time, when they were doing illegal abortions, they would take the woman in through the back alley. That's where the term back alley abortion came from. When the abortion was done in the back alley, it said you came in through the back alley. And even that seems a little needlessly cloak and dagger. Seems like you'd attract a lot less attention if you let her in the front door and pretended she was there for something legitimate. And, go ahead and fake your medical records, pretend you're doing something legitimate. But I guess the idea was, if she dies, you want to have her in a motel room and not in your office. Maybe. I don't know. Jesse Ketchum's dead, so I can't ask him. But at any rate, evidently he kept his nose fairly clean because even though he was arrested 3 times for doing criminal abortions, there were no maternal deaths linked to him in Michigan. So, but getting arrested is no fun. So when New York rolled out the red carpet, Ketchum went. And somebody actually referred to him as a carpetbagger later. Um, but at any rate, he shuffled off to Buffalo in the summer of 1970, and he set up shop in a motel suite because that's where he was comfortable. And, that was perfectly legit. Go ahead, motel room, good enough. You're a doctor, you have medical instruments, you do abortions, you're our buddy. Um, and it must have seemed like the promised land to him. I mean, safety standards completely went out the window. Um, Doctors were doing, at the time, was very, very popular in the second trimester to do saline abortions. And the world already knew these were dangerous. There were, after World War II, saline abortions became very popular in Japan, but a lot of women died or suffered really catastrophic injuries from this. And two Japanese doctors, Takashi Wagatsuma and Yukio Manabe, really, really tried to get the Western doctors to listen to them and say, just do not do this. You're going to be killing your patients. But of course, um, you know, baby's dead, good enough. That's the reality. And if you're pro-choice and you don't believe it, you need to look a little closer because that's the standard. Baby's dead, good enough. And I mean, we saw that with Kermit Gosnell, where nobody'd investigate. People would refer women to him because if you sent a woman there, the baby died, and sometimes she died too. But who's going to be picky? All surgery has risks. Yeah, when you've got cats roaming around, crapping on the floor, it's probably a little bit riskier. But let's not look too closely at that, shall we? We don't want to look too closely. So at any rate, it was anything goes. So even though these two Japanese doctors were just pounding the daylights out of this is dangerous, this is dangerous, this is dangerous, don't do it. And if you're going to insist on doing it, you better have that woman in a hospital. You better be monitoring her carefully. You better be ready for all of these complications because this is a concentrated salt solution, okay? Pickling brine, let's pickle that baby. And you get a concentrated salt solution in your bloodstream, it is not going to do nice things to you. I mean, the whole point is that this stuff kills the baby. It's not going to do you a favor if it gets into your bloodstream. But these doctors were just, taking these big old cardiac syringes, pull out a bunch of amniotic fluid, shove a bunch of this pickling brine in and send her home and, she'll expel the dead baby. I got my money, no problem. So, and women were dying because of this. And the health department was kind of, this isn't quite what we expected. We thought it was going to be sunshine and unicorns. So they published some articles about it. Even the Centers for Disease Control sat up and took notice and said, not sunshine and unicorns like we expected. How could this possibly be? But at any rate, from Ketchum's perspective, that was sunshine and unicorns. All right, there's nothing I can do that's going to get me in trouble here. So eventually he did open a proper office. And in May of 1971, I have the first serious complication that I found out about, which is he sent a woman home. He had lacerated her uterus and some other internal structures, told her that she'd suffered no complications, and sent her home, but she wound up hospitalized. And, back in Michigan, where abortion was illegal, that would have gotten him in a lot of trouble. He'd have been arrested. He'd have been off the streets. He wouldn't have been endangering any other women. But in New York, like I said, it wasn't sunshine and unicorns for the women, but it sure was sunshine and unicorns for Jesse Ketchum. Got in no trouble. So then he got really bold. Not getting in trouble for that. He started doing what's called hysterotomy abortions. And these aren't done anymore because they're major surgery, and there's far easier, safer ways to make sure that you get a dead baby than doing this. But a hysterotomy was basically a mini C-section where you sliced open the uterus, but the intention was to deliver a dead baby. And nobody's looking too close. I'm sure Ketchum just chucked him on a tray and let him die. Um, you can read the Edelin case. Kenneth Edelin in New York was doing an abortion on a teenage patient, past viability, and the witnesses say that he cut open the uterus, did something, probably cutting the cord, and kind of held the baby in there so it can't breathe because your face is smushed down into the amniotic fluid. You're not going to get a lot of oxygen. And there was some debate about whether he kept the baby in the uterus long enough for it to die or whether it died after it came out, if I'm recalling correctly. At any rate, he got away with it. Big hero for Planned Parenthood. Oh, yay! Kenneth Edelin was acquitted. Isn't that jolly? So you have to look at the kind of things that the abortion lobby, I'm not talking your ordinary pro-choice citizen, I'm talking stuff that the abortion lobby thinks is sunshine and unicorns. And Kenneth Edelin getting away with that was to them a thing of beauty and a joy forever. But at any rate, Ketchum did a modification to hysterotomy, which, I mean, I got to give him credit. This was an improvement over going in through the abdomen, cutting through the skin, the fat, the fascia, the all those layers. He just went up vaginally, and he, cut a hole in the vagina so that he can get up past the cervix, cut a hole in the uterus, pull the baby out to die. So he was doing this in his office, outpatient. But hey, sunshine and unicorns. We don't want to restrict what these doctors do. We want to trust them. We totally trust doctors. Gotta trust them, right? He does abortion, so he would never do a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad thing. He's one of us. So he's doing these in his office. And he started to capture a little bit more attention because June 16th, 1971, a 25-year-old Michigan woman named Margaret had been exposed to rubella, and she went to New York to have Ketchum do her abortion. And I don't know whether she knew him already from Ypsilanti or whether it was just clergy consultation services that sent her there. But so Ketchum started the hysterotomy at 10:30 in the morning, and then he left her pretty much unattended. And at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Margaret's boyfriend came and found her unresponsive, and he's begging Ketchum and his staff to please do something. She looks dead, do something. So, okay, we'll call an ambulance. They came over, took her literally across the street. There was a hospital across the street. Ketchum could have sent her there if he'd have been paying any attention, but he didn't. And she was pronounced dead. No surprise. She had bled to death. Ketchum had cut the hole in her vagina like he intended to do, and cut the hole in her uterus, and evidently cut into her cervix, but he only sutured her vagina. He didn't stitch the hole in her uterus shut. So surprise, 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 she bled to death. Now, back in Neanderthal, Michigan, where you weren't allowed to do this sort of thing, he'd have been charged with homicide. Period, paragraph. And actually, the boyfriend would have been charged too. Guess who else benefited from legalization? Okay, woman's just as dead, but the abortionist and the boyfriend aren't in trouble anymore. Well, actually, it turned out Ketchum did get in trouble. He was charged with criminally negligent homicide because of how appalling this malpractice is. You cut a hole in her uterus and then you don't bother sewing it shut. Okay, this is a little beyond the pale. This is not a nice thing to do. But he was out on bail and left perfectly free to continue practicing abortion. And even before the case went to trial, a 37-year-old woman from Ohio, 14 weeks pregnant, came to him for an abortion. She went into shock. Apparently, Ketchum did learn something from killing Margaret, which is that he didn't just let Carol lay there and bleed to death. She did get taken to a hospital, but she died before they could even finish assessing her injuries. She left 4 children motherless, and the autopsy found, true to his form, how he did abortions, he cut open her cervix and uterus to get the baby out, but he also cut an artery. And he put in some sutures, but he sewed her cervix shut. So you're not seeing any blood. Hey, out of sight, out of mind, no problem. Everything's hunky-dory here. Sunshine and unicorns. So she bled to death. And it was only 6 days after he killed Carol that he was convicted for Margaret's death. Now, he tried to leverage Roe versus Wade. There were quite a few abortionists who successfully used Roe versus Wade to say that retroactively the abortions they'd done that killed these women had been legal, because the state had no right to criminalize what they were doing, and they were successful. But that didn't work for Ketchum. Um, but he spent less than a year in jail, as opposed to spending a long, long time in jail for a murder conviction. Um, Relocated to Florida, managed to get himself into some trouble there, but nothing quite as spectacular. But we're looking at, this is what happens, and this kind of person you attract when you're like, oh, we can totally trust these guys. They do abortions. What could they possibly, what ill motives could they possibly have? And Ketchum isn't the only doctor who had a pretty clean record before legalization. Yeah, he was kind of quacky, but he wasn't taking ridiculous chances and killing his patients. He's one of 3 that I know of who were criminal abortionists, hadn't killed anybody, and then after legalization, sunshine and unicorns, let's start taking ridiculous chances, and killed 2 patients. Um, Now, Ketchum is not an abortion rights hero. He did not get a glowing obituary from the abortion rights movement when he died. But Milan Vuj did. Yay! He was a Serbian who'd come to America, and he just took up doing abortions. And, I can't attest to his motives. Bernard Nathanson said that, I can't remember if he got sent by clergy consultation services or what. Probably. They actually decided to take a look at Ketchum, at Vooch, and see if he was being quacky. And Nathanson said that, this guy's kind of questionable, but hey, he does abortions good enough. And Vooch had deliberately been doing abortions openly in order to get arrested so that he could challenge the Washington, D.C. abortion law. And he was successful, and they let him go to practice without let or hindrance. And he went on to kill a teenage girl and a young woman in her 20s with some pretty serious quackery. And what's astonishing is a reporter won an award for his investigation of how quacktastic Vooch's practice was, but he still got glowing obituaries when he died because he challenged the DC abortion law. Once an abortion law falls and these doctors are allowed to do whatever they want, it's all sunshine and unicorns. The other doctor was Benjamin Munson in South Dakota. This guy had a clean record as a criminal abortionist. Nobody dead that I've ever been able to find out about. But after legalization, um, he was doing incomplete abortions, and 2 women, Linda and Yvonne, died really, really horrible deaths because of big chunks of baby that he had left inside them. And this is one where the abortion lobby rushed to his defense. He's a nice guy. He does abortions. That's all we need to know about him. And he was also lionized when he died, as if he was somebody really special. So, but that's, you know, I wish I could understand why the abortion lobby makes the assumption that, willingness to do abortions automatically makes you a good guy. And I want to look a little bit more at what happened in New York. And please understand that this is, my list ends a bit prematurely because my primary source was, remember I said the New York State Health Department and the CDC were verily astonished that it wasn't sunshine and unicorns. And they went in and they looked at these deaths. So I'm just going to go through the ones that they found from July of 1970 to May of 1972, which is the period that they looked at. And I don't know of any New York abortion deaths, legal abortion deaths off the top of my head, between May of 72 and January of 73 when Roe came down. But if you look at how often these deaths are happening, there's obviously some I don't know about, because there's just no way that this abruptly stopped. Um, but a woman named Carmen in July of 1970, that salt solution that was supposed to kill the baby got injected straight into her bloodstream. That killed her. Uh, Same month, a young woman named Barbara. Um, she was, her doctor recommended an abortion because she had sickle cell disease, and the abortion triggered a sickle cell crisis that killed her. Another young woman, September of 1970, um, the doctor poked a hole in her uterus but sent her home to Indiana, and she died there. A young woman named Maria in October of 1970, the doctor shoved the fetus through the back of her uterus. And I remember reading the newspaper articles about this case. The doctor shoved the fetus through the back of her uterus, pulling things out, not seeing any fetus. I guess she wasn't pregnant, and sent her home. And of course, she died. Um, Another woman in December of 1970 went into cardiac arrest. January of 71, a pulmonary embolism, which is when stuff that's not supposed to be in your bloodstream is in your bloodstream, gets into your lungs and kills you. January of 71, again, an infection. Um, April of 1971, a young woman went in for an abortion. They did the abortion, sent her home, and kudos that they were at least doing the lab work. They did the pathology report on what they'd taken out of her uterus, and lo and behold, there was no fetus there. It turned out she had only thought she was pregnant. She wasn't really, and they didn't bother telling her about this. And she committed suicide in grief over the death of her baby. May of 71, a woman was injected for a saline abortion and sent home and bled to death. The next one was June of 71. That was Margaret. Another one, June in 71, went into cardiac arrest. Another one in July of 71 went into cardiac arrest. In August of 71, a woman died of infection. Again, in August of 71, they were injecting the saline for the outpatient abortion and evidently got it into her bloodstream. She went into shock and died. September of 71, another saline injection. She went into cardiac arrest. October of 71, a massive infection. Then there's Carol that we talked about. December of 71, they injected the saline into a woman's bloodstream and killed her. February of 71, another saline abortion. She started vomiting and went into seizures, and she aspirated. She got the stuff she was throwing up, went to her lungs and caused pneumonia that killed her. March of 72, cardiac arrest. April of 72, woman died after the doctor tore holes in her uterus and bowel. May of 72, a woman died of lingering complications. May of 72, a woman was massively overdosed on sedatives, shades of Carmine Mongar. And in May of 72, they somehow managed to get air into a young woman's bloodstream and kill her. Now, I'm not saying that more women died because of legalization than would have died had it remained illegal. What I'm saying is that the doctors no longer had to be looking over their shoulders and be afraid they were getting caught if they were being sloppy. Um, it had been previously that a dead patient got you into a whole world of trouble. The first person ever sentenced to die in the Illinois electric chair was an abortionist who had killed a patient. He managed to get his conviction overturned on appeal and kill another woman, which is what happens when you, all surgery has risks. Let's not worry about this dude. Legalization, when you look at the numbers, it didn't have any effect on the number of women dying. After antibiotics and blood transfusions, abortion deaths just started falling. And California legalizing, New York legalizing, Roe versus Wade, blanket legalization across the entire country. Absolutely not a blip. And so it wasn't a matter of fewer women dying. It was a matter of fewer abortionists going to jail. That was the major change that came down. So scenes in 1970, New York attracted Jesse Ketchum. It'll be really interesting to see what kind of lovely uh, champions of women's reproductive health care go carpetbagging to New York now. So it's not going to be a very bright day for women, but it's going to be a bright day for these guys, definitely, because after the New York law, they have to do the abortion by shooting the woman in the abdomen, pretty much, to get in trouble now. Everything Gosnell did has been legalized. Um, so we're going to have to see what happens.